What the fuck is an imaginary number? A few years ago, I had a class on electronic physics, and the concept of imaginary numbers was everywhere. When electromagnetic fields come up, the concept of imaginary numbers come up as well. And it's quite misleading to call imaginary numbers imaginary because, well, the things that they represent, they're very much real. Electromagnetic radiation is real. Our electronics work because we were able to establish the math behind electricity so well that we can probably predict how electricity works. But I was confused the entire time that we had the imaginary number I come up in our equations because what the fuck does that mean? What do you mean there's an imaginary number? What does it mean to imagine a number? Does it not represent something concrete? It's imaginary, no? And don't fucking tell me that it's dumb to wonder about these questions because it is from these basic questions that the person asking actually ends up with an even deeper understanding of what's going on compared to someone who wouldn't ask. Hi, my name is Beam. I'm an engineering grad student in Germany, and I'm gonna teach you some science. It just so happens that a property of the imaginary number I is that squaring it produces -1. Taking the square root of a negative number doesn't feel like a real-life thing you can do. On the other hand, taking the square root of a counting number is relatively easy to grasp physically. But think about this. You can double a negative number. For example, doubling your debt. What you did was just execute an operation on a negative number. In principle, you can also execute a different operation on a negative number. It just so happens that when you do that, you have to specify that the answer has an imaginary portion to it. So why am I talking about imaginary numbers? Imaginary numbers are particularly useful for situations where there's something oscillating, something going in circles. A typical number line goes positive on the right direction and negative on the other. To go from 1 to -1 on this line, for example, we need to multiply whatever we start with by -1. To go back, we do the same, multiply by -1. That seems familiar, no? What if I don't want to go all the way to -1? What if I want to go up there? Is this area accessible to me? With imaginary numbers, yes. Let's go back to 1. If in this world we multiply by I instead of -1, this area then becomes accessible to us. Multiply by I twice, we end up at -1, which is, once again, something that is probably familiar to you. Multiply that with another I and we end up here, and it goes on and on and on. So as I said earlier, this number I is useful for situations where something is oscillating, going in circles. Introducing this imaginary number line has made it possible for us to describe physical phenomena that have some sort of oscillation involved, like electromagnetic fields. The concept of imaginary numbers is just one of the reasons why math is cool as fuck. It is thanks to the many techniques in mathematics that we are able to relate quantities in the real world with the least amount of bullshit as possible. I'm in graduate school, and even as I've been in science for a long time now, it took until now to understand what an imaginary number is. And I'm sure I'm not alone in this. So I hope you also feel a little bit more enlightened by this short trip about imaginary numbers.